If you followed Shane Van Gisbergen's career for any length of time, you will know that he can drive just about anything. But he took that to new heights last night, winning NASCAR's very first street race around Chicago and his first entry in the Cup Series. Now, as a Supercars fan, I am just on a massive high right now. It was a fantastic performance, and watching this event really opened my eyes to a bunch of things. So I want to have a chat about Shane Van Gisbergen's win last night, NASCAR's running of this event, which really impressed me, and what this all might mean for Supercars and Shane's career specifically in the long run moving forward. Now, if you're new around here, Fan at the Fence, this channel is dedicated towards the Supercars Championship here in Australia. I normally have far more structured and prepared content, but this is such a special story that I just had to turn the mic on and have a chat about it. Alright, so let's talk about the win to kick things off. Now, going into this weekend, knowing it was NASCAR's very first street race and there was a bit of rain in the air as well, I had a suspicion that SVG was going to perform well. He likes those conditions, but I wasn't expecting a victory because the Cup cars are very different. The driver is on the opposite side of the cabin, he's changing gears with the other hand, and obviously the whole dynamics of a Cup race versus Supercars are completely different as well. So I suspected SVG to be strong, but I didn't think he would have a strong enough edge to take a victory in the way he did. But he set himself up well. He qualified third for the start of the race. And then, while the race had a really strong start in tricky conditions, he had his ups and downs as the events went on. He had a few radio issues at one point, some strategy unfolded that saw him as low as 18th at one point, and I think it was about 15 or 20 laps to go. He was barely inside the top 10, but he engaged what is his strongest trait as a driver, in my opinion, and that's his ability to create immense momentum when he's on a charge. I mean, when Giz is on the hunt, he's like a freight train coming through the pack, and sometimes that can result in some upsets and some contact and some controversy along the way. But when Giz is on a mission, everyone knows about it. We've seen it countless times in Supercars, and I think that's what we saw today as well. And that momentum ultimately got Giz to the front, having a great little battle with Justin Haley with only 5 laps to go. And I've got to give props to Haley and a lot of the drivers, to be honest with you, in the NASCAR Cup Series. I am a huge Supercars fan. It's the reason why I've made this channel. It's all about Supercars. But this was the first time I've really properly watched NASCAR with a bit of a vested interest, and I really liked what I saw, particularly from Haley in those final moments. He was on much older tyres but put up such a spirited yet clean defense. I mean, Giz put it up the inside, but Haley came back at him and he had so much commitment trying to get back down the inside at turn 3, which he did, but ultimately Giz was just a little bit too strong. But I was so impressed by what I saw, and I was really entertained by the racing action. And I think that praise has to extend to NASCAR itself as well, and the way they organised and executed this first street race event. We've got a lot of street races on the Supercars calendar, so I was really curious to see how things might be similar or different there in the States, but I was really impressed with the course. When I first saw the track map, I wasn't all that inspired. Many months ago when it was first unveiled, there were a lot of 90-degree corners, but when we got the cars to the track and saw them circulate, it became quite clear every corner was slightly unique. It had different track surfaces, different widths on entry and exit, which changed the speed and, approach to every single corner. And the skyline of Chicago in the background made it quite easy to identify what part of the track you were looking at. So it was quite easy to follow even as a fairly new fan to the sport of NASCAR. So I was really, really impressed. And I've heard plenty of chatter about if this event might be a one and done, whether they can attract the crowd and keep this going even for a couple of years, let alone in the long run. But I think despite the horrible weather, which is beyond the control of NASCAR to a certain degree depending on what time of year they go there, I think the crowd was still really, really strong despite those tricky conditions, and overall it looked like a fantastic atmosphere. For me, the mark of a good event is when you can hear the crowd over the cars, and that was certainly the case in Chicago. It was so good to see people so invested in the show. So getting back to the focus of this channel, which is of course the Australian Supercars series, what does all this mean? Let's start by talking about Shane Van Gisbergen's future, which I think We had a pretty strong indication on where that might be headed this weekend, and then what this all means for Supercars itself and some potential opportunities that both NASCAR and Supercars have to potentially work together. Now, starting with Shane, I think he pretty much confirmed his plans for the near future. When he got out of the car, he said he's committed to Supercars for 2024, and then he's keen to come to America for racing in 2025. Now, he said this when he just got out of the car, just won this race, he's on a massive high, so emotions were running strong. But I think even those emotional statements kind of align with where the signs have been pointing for a while now, and that he has been looking abroad beyond Supercars and at some other opportunities around the world. So I guess the next question is, would that be a good move for him? And I think personally, yes, it would be a good move. It feels like Shane has pretty much accomplished everything he can in the Australasian region when it comes to motorsport, and he has been looking for a new challenge for a while. That much has been clear. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen has dominated Supercars over recent years since Scott McLaughlin left for IndyCar, and the Gen 3 machinery that they've introduced to Supercars this year has proved a bit more challenging for him, but he's not really in love with it, and he sounds like he's ready for a new adventure in a new environment, and NASCAR would almost certainly check that box. I suppose the only points of caution around all this is that this event, the street race around Chicago, is an anomaly. It's not the usual NASCAR event, it's normally done on ovals, so obviously Shane Van Gisbergen can't expect the same instant success if he were to go racing in NASCAR full time, but I'm sure he's had enough of a taster this weekend, and he's probably shown enough and learned enough that he should have a good amount of confidence to decide if it's for him or not full time. And probably a safe route is for him to do a few one-off appearances at the ovals next year if a car can be made available while he's still racing in Supercars, so he can get a more rounded and, pardon the pun, impression of what NASCAR might be like on a long-term basis. But even then, it sounds like Shane's interest is not just NASCAR, it's just racing in the USA in general. He's already had a taster of IMSA and he's indicated a preference to do more of that in the future as well, and who knows, we might even see him do the odd appearance with his old sparring partner Scott McLaughlin in IndyCar. That one's probably more of a stretch, but one-off entries in that series also do happen, and he is no stranger to open wheelers either. Alright, so assuming Shane Van Gisbergen does leave Supercars to go stateside in the future, what would all that mean for Supercars here in Australia? Well, you can look at this from many angles, especially depending on where your fandom falls, but on one side, it is a shame, or it would be a shame to lose another fantastic talent from our sport. In the same way, I was slightly disappointed. It was bittersweet when Scott McLaughlin finished up to go to IndyCar a few years back. I imagine the feeling would be somewhat similar here if SVG calls time on Supercars, but on the other hand, it is a glowing endorsement of the driving talent that we do have here in this part of the world, and it might open up opportunities for other drivers in Supercars like Brody Kostecki and Cameron Waters who have expressed interest in NASCAR to go and give it a try. And while I wouldn't want to see us lose a heap of Australian and Kiwi drivers to overseas series, I do think that transfer of talent and the occasional cameo can be really good for both Supercars and NASCAR, because those personalities give each fan base something of a door, an entry point into another series that, you know, they can back someone, they can follow someone's race, and then learn a lot more about that other category by following that driver's journey through it. So I think NASCAR's onto a bit of a winning strategy here. I think their move to try and attract international talent recently has been a really good approach, whether that's Jenson Button, Kimi Räikkönen, or now SVG. And hopefully, once Supercars get more of a handle on Gen 3, which is the new regulations and cars they've introduced this year down under, hopefully they can explore a project like this and attract international talent down here to Australia, because I think this weekend has proven that you can cross-pollinate fan bases between different series, especially something like NASCAR, where there are some similarities in the core concept and what fans are looking for. So be sure to let me know down in the comments below if you think there is more potential for Supercars and NASCAR to collaborate in the future. And if you like the thought of Supercars and street circuits, well, this weekend has just what you're looking for. Supercars are back on track. You can see SVG in his natural habitat on the street streets of Townsville in Queensland this weekend. I will be back in just a couple of days with my usual round preview covering everything you need to know from the track, which is really fun in my opinion, and of course the key headlines and everything you need to know going into this weekend of racing down under. Until then, hats off to SVG for this accomplishment, props to NASCAR for what I think looked like a great event that I really enjoyed watching from afar, and I will see you in the next one.